Hello and welcome, my bookenders. This is Bookends of Recovery, where recovery gets real and loved ones aren't left out. I'm Laura, your unofficial cheerleader, with a challenging past, a hopeful heart, and the tools to help you through it all. Today, we're going to talk about something that is deeply personal to me, and it can be overlooked sometimes in our healing journey. It's about rebuilding trust in your instincts after betrayal trauma. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive in. I'm not sure how long this is going to be. I guess it just depends on how much I kind of go into my own stuff. So, yeah, just bear with me. Because I don't know if you know this, but I tend to do my podcasts pretty much like I do my blog posts. I kind of just do them by the seat of my pants. I have like a little stuff written out, but yeah. So, anyway. That's why I think some people like to listen to me, because they know I'm just all over the place. Squirrel. Anyway, one of the first things I lost during my husband's active addiction was the ability to trust my own instincts. And so, of course, as you know, instincts are there to help us make those quick decisions and keep us safe. So, like, when we're walking alone in a parking lot and we see someone that we think is suspicious and we just get that off feeling, that strange, weird feeling. Sometimes we might feel it in the pit of our stomach, or it's tingling in the back of your neck, and there's that voice in your head saying, something's not right here. That's your brain sending up a flare, sending an SOS, and warning you to be cautious, just watch out. But living with an active addict, in my case a pornography addict, made me doubt if what my instincts were telling me was true. I was being deceived by someone that I trusted and I loved. And that's the case whether you're living with a pornography addict or an alcoholic or a gambling addict, whatever it may be. Our instincts can get scrambled. And so when I walked into a room and I heard that, remember this is over a decade ago, so it was more the clicks of a mouse than a phone. And so I knew what that meant. He was closing out of pornography windows. I can't tell you how many times I would see it. But by the time he finished explaining to me, I was convinced that I hadn't seen what I knew I just saw. Because I was being gaslit into questioning my own reality. And I know that term gaslit is really thrown around a lot on social media, but as someone who literally lived it in my own home, I can promise you that's what happens. Your reality is twisted and warped into you saw it, but then you're convinced that that's not true. And I think I've shared before where that came from. It was from a movie where a woman is being gaslit by her spouse. But anyway, so after disclosure, I was determined to learn how to trust my instincts again. But first, I had to understand what our natural responses were, and I needed to forgive myself because I was really angry at myself for not doing something sooner. I carried so much guilt and shame for not just standing up for myself when his addiction was at its worst. I had turned into a shell of a person, and it just happened so gradually over the course of, because when we first got married, it his addiction was not the way it was, as it just progressed, and it just slowly wormed its way into our home. And so over time, he just turned into someone I didn't recognize. And I turned into someone I didn't recognize. And it was about a year and a half where we were just completely different people. And that's where I carried that guilt and that shame for not standing up for myself when his addiction was at its worst. And here's the thing, like, I was simply trying to survive a chaotic situation that I did not understand, and I'm sure that many of you can understand that. If you're listening as the loved one, I'm sure that you're nodding your head. And if you're listening as the addict, you're also probably nodding your head because you're like, yeah, I was not like this not that long ago. And so this is not a way for you if you are the addict. I'm not trying to bash you in any way. Like, I get it. I'm also in recovery, so I do understand, because even when I was active in my addiction, I remember there was a time where I would look back and think, God, I kind of miss the days when I just partied on the weekends. And I can't do that anymore. Like, I have to get high every day. Like, what the fuck happened to me? So I get it. So we need to understand what our instinctual response modes are, because our bodies respond to perceived threats in a few different ways. So when we recognize these responses, that can help us understand our instincts better so that we can help ourselves from doing things like, especially obviously for me, I was super hypervigilant, and that's what also masked my my instincts. So, we all know about, the fight mode. When we perceive a confrontation as like the best course of action, we may become defensive or aggressive. That adrenaline kicks in. How many times have you seen like a video on the internet where something happens and some people automatically, like, you can just see it, where people are just ready to stand their ground and argue back and just fight for their safety. You might feel like your muscles get tense and your heart rate is just increasing. They just want to fight, rawr, kind of thing. But then others are in flight mode, and you just want to get the hell out of there. You just escape whatever is threatening them. And sure, yeah, your heart rate speeds up and you're primed to leave. whether that's physically or emotionally. And while it looks like you're avoiding things, it's your natural response. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just your brain is like, okay, look, your best option right now is to just get away. And so it may show up as looking like you're avoiding confrontation or withdrawing from a difficult situation. And when neither fight nor flight feels safe for you, we may just freeze. We become stuck and you're unable to think or move, and our body just becomes immobilized. And we kind of just hope that the threat will pass, unnoticed. Your breathing becomes shallow, and you may actually feel detached from reality. And that's freeze mode. And then the other mode, which really doesn't get talked about a lot, is the fawn mode. And that is a way of placating the threat by making ourselves non-threatening or agreeable. So we may end up people-pleasing or becoming overly compliant. And that just means like we'll neglect our own needs to avoid conflict. And, our cortisol and adrenaline will increase as we're focusing on keeping the peace. So I'm wondering, as you listen to those different types of instinctual response modes, do you see yourself in any of those? Whether you are the one struggling or the loved one, because, we all have instincts. So, you could be, someone who has fight mode, flight mode, freeze, fawn. I went through several during the, that worst time of my husband's addiction. After his disclosure, I felt isolated and floundered for a good year. And I realized I could not do it alone. Like, I needed support, and I really struggled to find it because I was just, like I said, I had been stuck in hypervigilance and in survival mode, and I was in that high alert. And I was a part of, I've mentioned this before, of an online forum where this is like a funny sidebar. I was on Reddit. I'm on Reddit a lot. I'm sure people have seen me on there if you listen to this podcast. And somebody thought I was talking about another sub on Reddit, and they were downvoting me, and I was like, yeah, I'm not talking about a sub on Reddit, but whatever. This was on the internet over a decade ago. But anyway, that's my sidebar. But I had been part of an online forum on the internet, not Reddit. And the negativity and the anxiety was just so bad. And it was just adding to my stress. And I remembered something that a migraine forum moderator said to me once. She said that the people who are suffering the most are the ones that are posting. And the people who were feeling better have moved on with their lives. And she's right. Like, if you're doing well, the odds are that you're not going to be on a forum or on a sub, you know, out there seeking help, or giving great words of wisdom, like you're going to be living life. And so I wanted to be one of the people who had moved on, who was living a thriving life. And so I knew that I needed to change my environment to reduce stress and reclaim some of my peace. So, why does any of this matter about, trusting your instincts? Because eliminating unnecessary stressors helps your brain reset. It allows your instincts to come through clearly again. Because if you're staying in that constant state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, that can lead to chronic anxiety, PTSD, or depression, or a mixture of it all. And your brain starts reacting to everything as a threat. And that's when your instincts get drowned out by fear and panic. That's when a simple text can send you from 0 to 60 instead of giving you moments to pause. And of course, I'm using a personal example. You just don't have that ability to think and pause, take a deep breath, rationalize, because it's irrational the second you start thinking, because you're coming from a place of trauma. And I'm not, it's obvious, yeah, you're traumatized. But when you're starting to work on things, you're starting to work on yourself, your instincts get a moment to kick in. So let's talk about a few practical steps to start rebuilding trust in you. One of my favorite things is creating boundaries, especially if you're in a relationship that I ended up becoming in before I even knew it. My husband and I became super enmeshed, which is not how we started out. Boundaries are essential, and it might feel uncomfortable at first, but that's okay. Learning to say no is a powerful step in reclaiming your instincts and your sense of self. How many times have I said no is a complete sentence? And I won't get too deep into boundaries, but they are so healthy and they're so important to have. And remember, boundaries are not a form of punishment. You have to do them from a place of emotional well-being, not as a form of punishment, to each other. And then you need to notice your SOS signals. When your body is sending that strange feeling, right? That flare, pay attention. Acknowledge the message and ask yourself, why is this happening? Because that awareness is the first step toward trusting again. Is it an instinct, or is it a fear? Is it anger? Where is this stemming from? And then, please, if you're being gaslit, know that, and knowing that and recognizing that is so powerful. And one of the ways you can do that is just by simply writing it down. I know that sounds like so simple and basic, but a lot of times we don't even know it's happening. And it's almost like once you see it, you can't unsee it. I'm remembering, now I'm showing you how old I am, but when I was growing up, there was, my parents had this, black and wood sign. Okay, it was, and the wood part was raised. And if you didn't know what it said, you didn't know what it said. But then once you saw what it said, you always saw what it said. And so it said Jesus. Like the outline of the wood, in the black part, it said Jesus. And like I said, once you saw it, it couldn't be unseen. So it's like that. It's like write down the gaslighting moments and it'll help ground you and remind you what's real. Because when I started walking in and hearing that click click and then seeing it, and I'd be like, no. And then I would describe to him what I just saw. And then I would turn around, walk out, and write it down with the date. Because I've talked before about my, the list, my spreadsheet and all that shit. And so I was just very detail oriented. And that's what got me to be like, okay, I'm done with this nonsense. I'm so done. And it just gave me that extra courage, maybe. I don't even know if that's the right word, but push. I don't know. To be like, okay, I'm actually seeing what I'm seeing. And then something else that you can really do is remember and reflect on the times you trusted yourself before your instincts were tricking you, before they were not, I shouldn't say your instincts were tricking you. That's a bad way to say it. But before they were getting muddled. Because if you can write about the moments when you followed your instincts and how well it turned out, when that guy in the parking lot gave you the heebie-jeebies, and you left, and you're glad you left. And then compare that to the times you ignored your instinct. This builds a pattern of proof that you can look at, and it shows you that your inner voice is trustworthy. I talk about self-care all the time because, man, that pedicure is so good. But even those small acts like taking a warm bath, reading for 10 minutes, right now I am rereading The Life of Chuck because I know it's coming out in the movies. But, you can listen to your favorite podcast, which I hope is me. Let me toot my own horn. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, listen to a podcast that uplifts you, or listen to some cool music, go dance, which reminds me I need to go do my Oculus. But yeah, self-care, it helps you reconnect with your body. It tells your nervous system, you matter, you're safe, and it's just such a good reset. And then you can also balance instincts with logic, because instincts, they don't always seem logical, but that doesn't mean they're wrong. They're built on years of subtle experiences and pattern recognition. So yeah, they keep, I don't know, they're there. They were given to us for a reason. And so, especially, and I know this sounds terrible, I shouldn't say it, but as women, we really need to pay attention to that, because we just have that instinct to know when shit is wrong. And we also need to rebuild trust in our instincts, because it's like forming a new relationship with ourselves. It takes time and patience, of course. but we need to do it with grace, because that we don't give ourselves enough grace, I don't think. And again, if you're the one that's struggling and you're listening, you don't give yourself enough grace either. I think all of us just want to wave that magic wand and then be like, okay, cool, it's all done now. We're finished. I'm cured. I'm healed. It's all good. But it does take time. But the more you practice, the more confident you'll become. Your instincts might not always make sense to others, but they're rooted in your experience, your wisdom, and your truth. And so give yourself space to listen. Give yourself permission to believe what you feel. And remember, you are a superstar, my bookender. And I am rooting for you. You have strength that you never thought possible. And as always, I am in your corner. And I want you to know I'm always going to be here for you. So if you ever have any questions, just please, find me on my website. There will be a worksheet on this episode. And bookendsofrecovery.com. And don't forget to check out my Facebook community as well, Bookends of Addiction Recovery. This is Laura, wishing you a beautiful day, because you deserve it. Thank you so much, as always, for stopping by.